Good morning. I'm Jay Zavala, President of the Falmouth Chamber of Commerce, and I proudly welcome you to our Focus on the Future Forum, the Chamber and the Chamber's next 100 years. I want to thank our corporate centennial partner, Atria Senior Living, for underwriting this event. They're located over on Gifford Street. Our agenda this morning, we're going to have 5 respected authorities who will offer their unique perspectives on 5 important pillars of the Chamber, outlining the challenges and opportunities ahead. After their presentation, Congressman Keating will offer his thoughts on what's ahead. Before I get to our first speaker, just a couple of housekeeping notes. Please turn your phones to vibrate. I managed to get rid of mine altogether. And in case you're in need, the restroom facilities are through these doors to my left and your right. The mission of the Chamber of Commerce is to promote, support, and advocate for the business, education, civic life, culture, and the environmental interests of our town and of our region. Together with our neighbors from Sandwich, Mashpee, and Bourne, we focus on these pillars and we engage in the welfare of them because the quality of our lives depend on it. Together, we focus on business. We advocate for business because without a robust business sector, the economy will remain anemic and our ability to hire our neighbors and sustain progress will suffer. Education. We stand for quality education because without it, our children will not be prepared for higher education, work, and life in a world's economy and global society. And because without education, businessmen and women will not keep pace with change. Civic life. We push for a thriving civic life where we can work together to solve problems and interact with the institutions of representative democracy. Culture. We press for cultural richness so that our social fabric, language, art, literature, and our customs and traditions will not lose their luster. And the environment. We urge the preservation, restoration, and improvement of our natural environment because if we don't, the consequences could be dire. Our first speaker is the Executive Director of the Massachusetts Office of Business Development and the former Undersecretary for Business Development at the Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development. Michael will address the challenges and opportunities facing our business sector, and he will illuminate the way to strengthen the economy and increase job growth in our region. Please welcome Michael Hunter.
Thanks, Jay, and thank you to the Chamber and for all of you that turned out on this beautiful Sunday afternoon, or morning, Saturday morning. And that's how crazy this winter's been. Somebody asked me the other day if I had a snowblower, and I said, yeah, he's 18 years old and his name is Miles. My son is probably never going to speak to me again after this winter because I've had him out shoveling snow for the bulk of the winter. But look, again, it's great being here. I have several friends who live in Falmouth, including Commissioner of Agriculture, Greg Watson, who many of you probably know. Wonderful guy, previously worked at Woods Hole, has really been around the bend. Greg and I first met in the Dukakis administration. I was only 10 at that time, and but it was a wonderful time, and a wonderful time to be in government, as it's been under Governor Patrick. I had the pleasure of working for 2 really great governors, and it's been a very fulfilling experience. I left after the Dukakis administration and eventually went to the private sector. Never thought I'd come back, as Bob and I were just talking about, but did. And it's what I think about that government should be about, really should be about the public-private partnerships, and I encourage a lot of my colleagues who've been in government all their lives to plunge in the private sector and vice versa, so people can gather different perspectives. Because as you know, in this country, there is a lot of diversity on a whole lot of levels. I think the importance to our survival is understanding what those points of view are in order to become much more proactive and work for sustainability in our quality of life and our economic lives. That's me. As Jay had mentioned, I was previously Undersecretary for Business Development under Secretary Bialecki, and it was a great opportunity. It was a much broader view of the world, and as a result, I ended up filling in for the Secretary quite a bit, and many of his the economic development agencies he's responsible for, of which there are 14. And it really does cover the waterfront. I'm only going to skim the surface of, the types of things that obviously you folks have going for you in terms of not only your intellectual infrastructure, but also some of the opportunities that exist for Falmouth and the Cape in particular. Mass Office of Business Development, again, our mission is pretty basic. We're here to support businesses, which is expand and locate in the Commonwealth. And there are many ways in which we do that. The primary focus of what we do at the Mass Office of Business Development is really focused on tax incentives. It comes from the Economic Development Incentive Program. We reformed that program about 4 years ago to make it much more efficient. The focus is on job creation. We'd like to see a minimum of 50 new jobs created with every certified project that comes through the door, but we're flexible per area. We understand that some of our smaller communities don't have the opportunities to generate the type of economic volume we see in other parts of the state. But there are essentially 4 programs. What we were trying to do was make that program more efficient, make sure that we had companies who had other alternatives, and we're really going to bring economic value to Massachusetts. We wanted to make sure that our criteria really afforded us the opportunity to make that happen. In addition, we put a lot of emphasis on manufacturing. And I think part of what I'll talk about a little bit is I think there's a real need to make sure that we're all aware of some of the opportunities around manufacturing and also what it's evolved to be. It's a long way from my father's General Motors back in the 60s. And we think, and we're starting to see a rebirth through reshoring companies who have left the country, Massachusetts, because of our expense, some of our cost issues, who are now returning. And we put in place some, I think, pretty significant initiatives to help that happen. In terms of some of the other things we do, financing, we help companies find financing. We work with some of the quasi-publics throughout the region, the regions that make that happen. Site selection, companies looking for sites, we assist in that effort. Workforce development, permitting and regulatory. Governor undertook a regulatory reform initiative a couple of years ago now that's been very successful. A lot of work needs to be done, but I think the fact that we now acknowledge there's a need to get a control of this issue continues. Infrastructure, through the MassWorks program that we coordinate with the Executive Office to provide infrastructure for economic development and housing programs, business consultation of any times. We're throughout the regions, 6 regional directors. If you folks need to talk to us, please give me a call. Buddy Rocha is serving both the whole Southeast region right now, but I'm at your disposal as well. So we're here for you, and we welcome feedback at any level. Again, Governor Patrick and my boss, Greg Bialecki, have built an effective strategy that builds government, business, academic collaborations to grow our innovation economy and create opportunity for everyone. and I do mean everyone. The governor, one of the major tenets of his administration is being economic parity throughout the state. And frankly, it's been a challenge, but hopefully that'll be part of the legacy that we establish, the need to make sure that every region of the state has the adequate resources it needs to sustain its economy and continue to grow. Core principles of the strategy: education, innovation, and infrastructure. And again, we have used this strategy to recover from the Great Recession and stronger and faster than the rest of the country. Just quickly, in 2013, we added 50,000 jobs in Massachusetts. Unemployment rate is lower than several of our neighbor states at 7%. Quick snapshot: the Cape lags slightly behind the Commonwealth with respect to lowering unemployment rates, not substantially. Wages lag somewhat behind those of the rest of the Commonwealth. It has, however, grown faster than the rest of the state since 1990, 10.4% versus 15.4%. So a lot of good things are happening here. Again, all of you make that possible. Just in terms of some of the challenges as we saw them, again, it's a very competitive marketplace. Everybody in the state is competing for business. I think when we looked at the employment base here in the Cape, it was, in my mind, it's a little bit more diverse than people expect. And that's something that I think the state has taken note of, and we've tried to feast some resources to help all those areas, help support the various growing industries or clusters here. One of the pieces, I thought was a little bit odd. I would have liked the sequence to be a little bit different on this, but the tourism is a big deal on the Cape. That's not going to change. I think there's a lot of wonderful things happening on the Cape. Barbara and I were just talking about historic preservation is a critical component of tourism and attracting tourism. We understand we need to preserve the historic gems that we have in Massachusetts, and particularly in Falmouth and throughout the Cape. So we continue to work to do that. Tourism, we've expanded direct flights from Logan to Turkey, to Japan, to Dubai, to Panama, and of course to China, which represents an enormous opportunity for, I think, our country in general from a tourist standpoint as well as economic development. But we're predicting 100 million Chinese tourists in the United States on an annual basis. So I think Matt's Office of Tourism, Betsy Wall has been working very hard and with all the tourism groups to make sure that we can support some of those efforts to attract folks and make that a meaningful economic impact for the Cape in other parts of the state. And the Cape is a very popular place to Chinese, Japanese, and Turkish folks. I've been in rooms with everybody and with all those folks, and they're always clamoring to see the Cape and understand what the features are. Just backing up, I mean, some of the, I think, challenges are obvious. There's a perception in that it's one way in, one way out. We know there are challenges because of the geography here. I think, one of the ways that we begin to help, to the extent that people want us to help from the state perspectives, is the bridge expansion that's being planned, the expansion of Cape Flyer service, the public transit, all of those things. I think the state can be helpful in supporting folks here. And again, we want to do it in conjunction with you. Bigger issue that I think reaching that balance between conservation and economic development. My kids learned to swim on the Cape. It's a very important treasure for all of us. So we want to make sure that the quality of life is preserved and work with you folks to ensure that happens while simultaneously making sure that we don't overlook any economic development opportunities that would make the economy more sustainable. Just quickly, the Clean Energy Center in Massachusetts has taken off. I mean, on a per capita basis, we're among the top 10 in the country, given what's going on with clean energy. 80,000 clean energy sector workers in Massachusetts, quite substantial. A lot of that is, again, back to our intellectual infrastructure and ingenuity that's driving it. Several programs I think the Cape has taken advantage of, and we hope it will continue to take advantage of. Wind turbines, clean energy, the Clean Energy Center Catalyst Program, $40,000 grant program to support clean energy initiatives in general. In Commonwealth Wind Program, a little bit of a different program, but essentially the same premise, focusing on wind. This includes community engagement and feasibility, so we want to make sure that all this stuff happens with your input and is done in a very balanced, thoughtful way. But both from a job standpoint and I think from a job growth standpoint and energy standpoint, this is very important stuff. On the education side, Governor has taken paid a lot of attention to what's going on with VOC-Ed and some of the programs that have been initiated that are at both Cape Cod Tech and Upper Cape, really attempt to tie education back to some of these emerging industries. And we continue to put a lot of resources into those areas, both in VOC-Ed as well as Cape Cod Community College, a STEM program. The governor's committed $36 million to the STEM initiative here at Cape Cod Community College. That's a whole other discussion, but there's some real exciting things that are happening already and will continue to happen. And broadband initiative, 350 miles of cable. I think we know how important that is to the region. Otis and Woods Hole were the first major customers. I think there's some tweaking that needs to continue to go on, but it's important stuff. It's important for business, whether you're a fledgling business or an independent sole proprietor. The Joint Base Cape Cod Initiative, Federal Aeronautics Aviation approved the unmanned aircraft testing integration. That mass development has really been our driver, if you will, for that initiative. With some of the great things that are going on there with the various military installations, there's projections of 1,000 jobs and $360 million of revenue and taxes. And I think that represents a great opportunity. Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, there's a myriad of things going on there that we support directly or indirectly. I think some of the aqua robotics initiatives that have come out recently, we're very excited about, and its transfers to commercial application. So a lot of resources. We want to continue to support these initiatives every way we can. And I think from the community perspective, it's very important to begin to triage and really think about how you can leverage some of these resources for the Cape. I think Mass Technology Collaborative has been a great source of technical assistance dollars that support a lot of the cluster development that's gone on here in the state. I would just encourage people to stay on top of that stuff. Make sure if you're noticing specific trends that you have an opportunity to take advantage of those. State resources, Coastal Capital obviously is the Cape's community development finance institution tied to the financing small businesses here on the Cape. We have, through the Mass Growth Capital Corporation, have been very aggressive about trying to support what Jeannie's doing down here, and we are currently providing 3% loans to Coastal Capital. We hope to include that allocation next time around, hopefully soon, because we have it's a 3% interest rate. It's not going to hold forever. In addition to that, there's a technical assistance component that Coastal Capital also provides, funded through Mass Growth Capital, for businesses who need help and everything from business planning to higher up strategic thinking. Solid Corporation supporting growth on the Cape. Mass Growth Capital Corporation, again, it's the Secretary Bielecki and I combined two financing organizations, two quasi-publics in the state that were doing a good job but not having as much meaningful impact as we think. And that has become an alternative for capital, loan guarantees, and targeted technical assistance. We'd like to use that. We use that in conjunction with Coastal Capital and other community development financing institutions do throughout the state. Mass Development, everybody knows, not everybody, but a significant amount of folks understand that they finance business, they provide equipment financing. One of the key components that they've been involved in recently is the Advanced Manufacturing Initiative. And I think that they're creating an $18 million futures fund, which is going to do a range of things from providing financing to folks who are involved in manufacturing, as well as supporting a grant program for nonprofits who are involved in manufacturing. It's pretty extensive, and I would encourage people to go to Mass Development's website to get a sense of the kind of things that are going on. Amp It Up is really an attempt to raise the consciousness of people in general with a focus on youth regarding manufacturing, because I think there's a real, there isn't a lot of clarity about what manufacturing has become today. Obviously a lot of it is driven, again, by technology, but some of it is really about problem solving and entrepreneurship. And, but we also know there are folks out there like National Grid and many of the engineering-driven companies out there that are losing their knowledgeable workforce, and they need, number one, folks to replace the workers they're losing. But in addition, there are many more entrepreneurial opportunities that exist in manufacturing in general. Mass Ventures is just another one of our agencies. It's focused on venture capital. They have the START program, which is a program that really has been, we're providing grants to get folks through the early concept stage to commercialization. It's tied to the federal government's SBIR program. Many of the defense contracts that frankly are not only doing defense-driven activity, they're doing a lot of, they're leading to a lot of industry-related applications that go beyond where we are, where it go beyond defense. Workforce Training Fund is another one of our resources that we want people to be aware of. There's a workforce training program that's pretty significant. You can get grants up to $200,000 to support your training for your workers. In addition to that, there's several programs, but they've recently introduced the Hiring Incentive Training Grant targeting employers hiring veterans and folks who have been unemployed for 6 months. And I think those are two very important areas for obvious reasons. The economy has wreaked havoc, which has made it harder for folks to get back to work. We're trying to help in that effort. In addition, we know that the vets should be a priority, and this is one of our attempts to do that. And I think there's going to be more to come around that issue. Just in terms of the type of information we have available, the Massachusetts Business Portal, still a work in progress, but it's a one-stop business portal with information, tools, and more all intended to help businesses succeed here in the Commonwealth. So take a look at that if you're considering starting a business or you need help with your business. I think you'll find that you can reach this guy anytime, unfortunately. And I love engaging with folks. So please, if you have any questions, if you have any suggestions for us, let me know. I guess in closing, a couple of things. The governor is always fond of making this comment about how, when he lived in Chicago, when you moved into a new neighborhood, folks brought you a pie. In Massachusetts, his comment is, when you move into a neighborhood, people expect you to bring a pie. And I think it says something about our culture, which in the end, we have great folks of great character, but it takes time to get to know people. I think what we also want to encourage is greater collaboration. We work with Wendy at the Cape Cod Chamber significantly. She's actually one of our REDO's regional development organizations. We have a whole program. We're funding about 13 entities throughout the state, and we're trying to do that on a regional basis. The reason for doing that is really to encourage people to think about what trends they're seeing in their particular economies, what types of challenges, whether land use, transit, et cetera, and triage and figure out what your narrative should be to the state. Because I would discourage people from expecting the state or any entity to respond immediately to your needs. You folks generally at local level know better than anybody what those needs are. I think the challenge is getting a coherent narrative that you can then articulate back and to the state for the types of resources or in support you need. Secretary Bielecki has made no secret of the fact that most of the programs he's created, from our tax incentive programs to the MassWorks programs to some of the broader sort of more esoteric types of emerging tech programs, that he really wants people to show up having thought through how they're going to have an economic impact, and do it collaboratively, because frankly, we all know there are limited resources, but economic development is really about collaboration and working together, but doing your homework. And I think that's been sort of a great experience for me to working with Greg, my boss, that he really, he'll give you the resources to really conduct your due diligence and feasibility analysis, but then he expects people to come together with programs that are executable, that actually can happen. So I think we're here for you folks. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. So I don't know if you're taking notes, but I am. He mentioned someone by the name of Barbara. That has to be Barbara Milligan, who's working so diligently to enhance our tourism initiatives with regard to culture. He mentioned Wendy. That can be none other than Wendy Northcross, the president and CEO of the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce. And the other notes that I made is that Michael spoke about clean energy, broadband, tourism, Joint Base Cape Cod, and business financing, technical assistance, and workforce training. For the business community, those are the areas that we can look for in the future. But as I indicated at the beginning, the Chamber of Commerce is more than just about business. Our second speaker, the president of Fitchburg State University, let me move this slide along here. There we have it. The president of Fitchburg State University, former state commissioner of education, and past superintendent of Falmouth Public Schools. He will speak to the importance and value of education, from lifting us out of poverty to boosting economic growth. Education affects every aspect of life. Please welcome Dr. Robert Antonucci.
Good morning, everybody. It's nice to be in Falmouth, to be down the street and be here in 3 minutes, other than driving down from Fitchburg. In case you think we have a lot of snow here, we're up to 6 or 7 feet outside my window. And my grandkids were here last week and they got lost in the snow. That's how deep it is. Well, it's good to have you here. Education is very important to me. It's all about our students and our children and what we can do for them. And in effect, it impacts business. It impacts the business community. Without a well-educated workforce, you don't have a successful business. And so our family has been in education for a number of years. It's been exciting for me. Every job I've had, it's been exciting. The 12 years here in Falmouth as superintendent were some of the best years of my life. Both my kids went through the Falmouth schools and did a great job. My daughter Karen here is principal at North Falmouth Elementary School, doing a much better job than I could have ever done. John Cox from Cape Cod Community College, a good fellow president. My friend Tom, who was the superintendent, we're all about it. Well, I want to set the context this morning. We're going to be talking about students. I don't see many in the audience. I see one young lady. I don't see other students. I'm going to show you a quick snapshot of a college student. Now, I'm not pushing Fitchburg State University. It's all about Fitchburg. It is the #1 state university. It's got a great president. It's got wonderful students. But put any student in there. Put Cape Cod Community College, Tufts University, Providence College, anybody. But I want to just make our attention focus on why are we doing all this thing in education? And it really is all about students. So if technology works here, it should come up. Hold on 1 minute. I didn't set this up, so, and you may not see it at all.
Let's go there. Are we there?
Yeah, we're right here.
Okay.
All right, hold on. And I should click on it, and the video should come right up. Yeah, I got it.
You got it?
We're hitting
We
everything.
can help our educators do this.
Yeah, well, it should work fine. Nope.
Here comes my
Here's
IT
our
tech
assistant.
geek girl.
This should work fine if you just click on it.
That's why Adrian exists. Adrian, press play. Okay, just come on up.
It should go on, right? Want to do it? All right, you know what? I will tell you, these students are great. Forget it. This young student is one of our students here. Here's what they said. They love higher education. They love going to school. They're committed to being the best they can in class. And any student in any school does a good job. So this slide basically says, and I really believe in this, that our children today and our young adults are the best educated in the generation. We hear so much criticism about schools and about students. If we were that bad, why are we graduating students who are so successful? Why do they go on to be our business leaders? Why do they go on to be our doctors? Why do they go on to be our nurses? We're doing things right. Now, does it mean that we're there? The answer is no. There's a lot of poverty. There's a lot of opportunity where students do not have. But if you look at our schools today, and you look at the students who are coming to our schools, in my opinion, they're much better prepared than they ever have been. There is so much available to them to learn that if they take advantage of those opportunities, they will succeed. So I want to focus today on the new common is birth to college university studies. It used to be kindergarten through grade 12 for many of us. I'm looking at the color of the hair in mine. We used to talk about K to 12, elementary, secondary, college, university. Today it starts at birth. We have a program in Fitchburg called the Dolly Parton program that the minute a child is born, we sign that child up to receive a book a month until they're 5 years old. And that's for a group of students who otherwise would not have that opportunity to learn. So we're starting right at birth to begin to focus on what students are all about and what children are all about, how they develop, how they learn, how they prosper, all the way up to college and university. I'm not including the adult learners. We're all learning. Many of you are still learning how to use this cell phone. Many of you are still learning to use some of the computer technology we have today. It's different for us. Kids coming into schools today, it's second nature. It's like the dial phone used to be. I'm making that comment for a lot of us. We know how to dial it, right? So that's what it's all about. So that's what my focus is. But before we can go on, I want to look back. This is all about history. 100th anniversary of the Chamber, we're celebrating. We should be celebrating education. This guy, real picture, is not me, at the historical ball. This is Horace Mann, who really grew up in Massachusetts and really was the founder of the Common School movement as we began to develop the importance of education within the state. He basically was the first commissioner of education in Massachusetts. There is a statue of him at the State House if you visit there. I was the 21st commissioner of education. So from the early 1700s to the 1900s, we only had 21 people who took that responsibility of being the head of state. And basically what he said is there is a common school movement in this country that's very important. And every student, no matter where they come from, no matter what color they are, no matter how tall they are, no matter what their family background is, should have an opportunity to succeed and to learn. And that really was the common school. Common meaning for everybody, not a select group. And oftentimes when we compare ourselves to international education, we're talking about societies who select at a very early age who is going to go on. What class are you going to be in? What school are you going to go to? We don't in this country. And that's the richness of the United States, that everybody has that opportunity to succeed. So where are we today? Where are we going? How are we going to get there? Well, we're today in a situation where there are so many demands being placed on society that oftentimes it's difficult to begin to delineate where we should focus our attention. There isn't a day that you get on the web or you pick up a newspaper or a magazine that we hear some kind of comments made about the educated students in our country, the workforce. So today we're at a point where I think is the best we've ever been at. We've had the standards. I became commissioner in 1992. We started the standards movement. We started the assessment movement. I think we've gone a little too far today with that. We got to swing it back a little because we want our teachers to be creative and to take care of students. But our schools today have never been as better as they have been. I look at the schools 25 years ago, or 40 years ago when I started, I would take today over anything we've done in the past. So we are making efforts today. What I tell my board, I say to my board of trustees, they say, what's going on? I said, we're not there yet, all right? And they said, when are we going to be there? So I said, the day we're there, I'm leaving, okay? Now, they could tell me you're there now, but they don't. That could happen. But, and so when I say where we are today and that we're good and we have this standard of excellence, we're not there yet. We have a long way to go. We will always have a long way to go. Just as in business, continuous improvement to make things better than they are principles that we have to focus on. So where are we going? We're going at a much more rapid speed than we ever have. If you have not been into a high school class or a class at Cape Cod Community College or an advanced chemistry class at Fitchburg State University, you will not realize what's going on in those classrooms today. Those of you who have children that come home with homework, you have no idea what they're talking about. The technology, the STEM initiative that you spoke about, science, technology, math, engineering, it's all different today. Students are being exposed to things today that they have never been exposed to in the past. So where are we going? We need to keep up with that demand. And we have to go at a much more rapid pace. We can never give up the fact that we have to invest in our schools. If we don't invest, we're not going to be successful. How are we going to get there? Well, we're going to look at these influences. First of all, the basic premise is we have to look at the student. Anything we do in our schools is about the students. I tell our faculty that all the time. If it were not for the students, you wouldn't have a job. If it were not for the students, I wouldn't be the president. They are our customers. They hate to hear that word. But they are our customers. They're consumers. Even at the K-12 people. Why are they customers? Because we pay property taxes to support those schools. So we are paying for that service. And so our students have to have opportunities that are second to none. Parents are critical today. Parents are critical to the success of students. The economy drives us. The economy drives schools. If you look at our community colleges, John will tell you this, the economy drives what we have to do to train our students to be successful, related to the workforce needs. Cost is important. Cost is always going to be an issue. It's expensive. But we have to invest in order to succeed. Technology is driving us crazy. We spend a significant amount of technology that we've never spent before. I walk around with a cell phone, with a computer, with an iPad, with an iPod, with a Kindle. Christ, I'm going to plug myself into a thing and have one charger and I'll be much better off, all right? But if you watch students learn on the college campus, if you watch these students learn, they can handle all of these. It sends you crazy and it sends me crazy, but they get it. If you go into I was in a biology class the other day. We just bought a brand new microscope. This will kill you. It only cost $80,000. But you can look at live cells, and you can look at the migration and mutation of cells and all of that. But if you go in that class and you see students using that technology, it's amazing. Look at the surgeons in our operating rooms. They talked about the games when you have thumbs. If they didn't play those games, they wouldn't be using those thumbs like they're doing today. That arthroscopic surgery is all about that. Diversity and changing demographics, biggest challenge that we have. The United States today is not the United States that you and I grew up in. Falmouth is not the community we grew up in. Diversity is critical. In Fitchburg, the population of the city of Fitchburg is 65% minority. When I grew up in that region, it was white, Catholic, Irish, French, and Italian. We are now the minority. But that diversity and that mixture is wonderful. Globalization, we can't just focus on what's important here in the United States. We need to look at the world as a whole. And we have to have the skills necessary. You talk about manufacturing. Go into a manufacturing plant today and see how they're making products. Nothing like the toothbrush machine I worked on 40 years ago when I did everything by hand. If you're not good in robotics today, and you're not good in game design, and you're not good in engineering, you can't go into a manufacturing plant. So these are the influences. What's it going to take? Leadership. We got to have some competency. We got to have a standard of excellence. Here's my biggest thing. In education, we can't settle for mediocrity. You won't settle for mediocrity on the operating table. But sometimes you're willing to settle for mediocrity in our classrooms, in our universities, in our colleges. We can't have another chance. Every day we miss an opportunity to make students succeed in the classroom, we are losing that opportunity. So we have to do that. We have to be best in class. That's my biggest. I tell our students, I started the conversation, we are the #1 state university. If John didn't feel that Cape Cod wasn't the #1 Cape Cod university, he shouldn't be there. If Karen didn't feel that North Falmouth was the best elementary school, she shouldn't be there. If Jay didn't think this chamber was the best, he shouldn't be there. It's that attitude, it's that commitment, it's that energy to make sure that we do things that are successful. And you have to have a plan. You can't shoot from the hip. That's very, very important. So that's what it's going to take. It's going to focus on access, affordability, and opportunity. That's what it's all about. I don't have to give you a lecture on the historical aspects of education and what we need to do. Now, as I close, the future is bright. But look back. I've got a few slides up here. This is the technology group. It talks about how people think. This first one is from the 1700s. This was an educator speaking. I'm not going to read each one. Students today depend on paper too much. They don't know how to write on a slate without getting chalk dust all over themselves. They can't clean a slate properly. What will they do when they run out of paper? All right, so then we move to the 1800s. Look at that one. Depending too much on ink. All right, they don't know how to sharpen their pencil with a knife. Then we go to the 90s, if I'm going 200. Now we got to depend on store-bought ink. When I was in elementary school just last year, we made our own ink. If you remember those days with powder, now we're going to buy what's going to happen now. This is a sad commentary on modern education. 1928, fountain pens came alive. Why are we using these fountain pens when we have these little pens that we can use ourselves? 1940s, ballpoint pens will be the ruin of education in our country. What will happen? Business and banks will never allow such expensive luxuries. 1950, remember the calculator debate? Oh, how are we using these calculators in school? Lock them in your gym bag. Don't come into the class with them. How are you going to figure out trig ratios without a calculator? 1993, who would ever want to use the internet for student use? It's just a fad. Have them use the library, okay? 1995, no one will ever use email. All right, why are they going to do that? And then all of a sudden, in 2014, who thought we'd be using iPads, smartphones, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat? Where's it going in 2015? I have no idea. Where's it going in 2030? I have no idea. Where's it going in 2050? I won't be around. So, that being said, education, the key to success in society. It takes commitment. It takes energy. We can never sit back on our laurels. Remember, it's all about the children that we serve. If we don't do our job, and we don't do it right, and we don't try to be best in class, and we don't try to be the #1 focus of our attention, then our students are getting a disservice that they don't deserve. You and I together can do it. The society can do it. Let's move ahead. Let's be energetic. Let's focus on what's best for our children and for society. If you do and I do it, we're going to be great. Congratulations to the Chamber for the great work that they've done. It was fun to be here. Have a good day.
You know what I've always appreciated of Bob is how low-key he is. So, all right, let's have a wrap-up, right? The first thing I picked up on is no matter how tall you are. I would naturally pick that one up, wouldn't I? Right? That was intended for me. And I'm paying attention because I will be here for another 30 years. Rapid speed, the speed at which we're traveling into the future. Bob also mentioned a couple of names. Everybody's dropping names today, right? John Cox, the president of the Cape Cod Community College, our guest today. He mentioned Karen, his daughter, Miss Carson, who's not only a principal, she's also a director on the Falmouth Chamber of Commerce Board. Bob talked about spoke about diversity, globalization, robotics, engineering, and he spoke to excellence and affordability. And of course, we all have a stake in that affordability. And then he mentioned ink. We depended on ink, and have you noticed? We still depend on ink, and it's more expensive than ever. One cartridge of ink, you're either in business or out of it. So, Bob, thank you very much for taking us on this education odyssey. Our third speaker is a local civic activist, former state legislator, and practicing attorney. He will speak to the challenges and opportunities ahead in our civic life and help us define the public good. From individual volunteerism to organizational involvement to electoral participation, Eric will help us find ways toward greater participation. Please welcome Eric Turkington.
Thank you, Jay. Give me a hand with this.
Yep. Here's your pointer,
Okay,
to and from, and there's your first slide.
so this is to go forward. Beautiful. All right. Well, good morning. You got a run through of the history of education a minute ago. I'm going to give you a little bit of a run through on the history of the Falmouth Chamber of Commerce and its predecessor. Before there was a Chamber of Commerce, there was the Falmouth Board of Trade and Industry, which was formed in 1896. And their slogan, "Enough for all," sounds like something out of Occupy Wall Street, doesn't it? But that was their slogan. And you notice on the insignia they put together, that was a herring and a net. And in those days, the herring and the net symbolized what Falmouth was all about. That we had such an abundance of natural resources that could be the insignia of the Chamber of Commerce. We've come a long way. 1914, of course, the Falmouth Chamber of Commerce was formed, and they had a different slogan: a better, bigger, busier Falmouth. 100 years later, I'd say they got their wish. Yes, here we are. Little more history lesson here. Back in 1914, when the Chamber was formed, the town population was 3,287 people. Now we're 31,514. The assessed valuation of the whole town, every building, every piece of land, every animal, $16 million. Today, the assessed valuation is $10.6 billion. The town fathers will be disappointed that the bonded debt back then was $263,000. Today, it's $120 million. And you look at the names of the leaders of the Chamber of Commerce back then: Burgess and Hatch and Ewins and Crocker, Lawrence, Hamlin, Nickerson, Nye. None of them are in business today. You look at the leaders of the Chamber now: the Augustas, the Fernaris, and Gelfi and Puccillo, Greenfield and Calfee, Estes and Bales. The diversity that Bob was talking about, we found it. We're here. The civic engagement in this town, if you count civic engagement and define it by the people joining together who make good things happen in this community, Falmouth is flourishing. From the hospital to Highfield, from the Falmouth Chamber of Commerce to the Falmouth Chamber players, Arts Falmouth, VIPS, Together We Can, Falmouth Historic Society. I could spend my entire 20 minutes up here reading off lists of organizations that people put together in this town to make things better. There is no place, I believe, certainly on Cape Cod or in Massachusetts, where there is more civic engagement in terms of getting things together to make good things happen in a community. But if civic engagement, on the other hand, is defined by civic engagement in town government, we have a problem here in Falmouth. As you can see by the chart, the voter participation in local elections, which peaked in 1979 at 55%, has been declining each decade since then. In the 80s, it got up to 40%. 1990s, it got up to 35%. In the year 2000s, it got up to maybe 25%. In the year 2010, we hit slightly less than 20% in that election. These are in local elections now. The state elections and the federal elections, people still show up. But in the town elections, not so much. It shows in other ways, too. Oops, back up. We had fewer elected positions on the ballot that are contested. Often, the only one contested on the ballot is the selectman. Town meeting candidates in the last election, you need 9 candidates to get enough candidates to run for town meeting. In 5 precincts, there were more than 9 candidates. In 3 precincts, there were just 9 candidates. And in 1 precinct, there weren't even 9 candidates. At the last selectmen's meeting, the chairman of the selectmen read off a list of all the town committees, appointed committees that had vacancies. We had 44 vacancies on these town committees. That tells you something. So the question is, why is all this happening? Well, there's some good reasons and there's some not so good reasons. Good reasons, we got a lot of new people in town, new registered voters. They've come from somewhere else. They came here to retire or to do something different. They came from somewhere else and they don't know the local candidates and the local issues, so maybe they feel like they shouldn't get involved. Fair enough. Another piece that makes it hard on participation is town government is enormously more complicated than it ever used to be. There's more mandates, there's more federal and state guidelines and language that becomes increasingly obscure. We talk about overrides and exclusions and long-term excluded debt and short-term excluded debt, and I don't know what they're talking about, and most of the voters probably don't either. So that makes civic engagements hard when people don't think they can speak the language intelligently. We have some other issues that inhibit public participation here. If you talk to a selectman in this town, you'll find that under the charter, they are prohibited from dealing directly with a department head or any other town employee except the manager. Well, if you've got a pothole or you've got a street that hasn't been plowed, you want the town employee who's in charge of this to know about it, and the selectman can't talk to him. The members of the Board of Selectmen have no individual authority under the charter. They can only act collectively. This is, of course, frustrating for the selectmen and frustrating for the citizens. Even more frustrating, we have an open meeting law in the state that prohibits any substantive conversation between more than 2 selectmen at a time, except in a public meeting, posted more than 48 hours in advance, and only on topics previously posted. You think that makes constructive dialogue easy? It does not. The legislature passed this law after they exempted themselves. We have to live with it. So there was a cartoon in the Hyannis Daily a week or 2 ago, which addresses another concern that people might have found when you go to town hall. Make a phone call and see what happens. And this is true in Falmouth, but I'm sure it's true in a lot of other town halls too. Somehow, when the people call in, a tape recording is sufficient for them. Now, how do people find out what's happening in town government? And that's something else that's changed. Thank God we have a weekly newspaper in this town, the Falmouth Enterprise. A lot of towns don't. And over the course of the last decade, a lot of towns have lost their local paper. We used to have a Cape Cod Times bureau in this town with reporters and all and an office and all kinds of staff and such. That's disappeared. We have no regional paper representative in this town. A big difference. So people, naturally, maybe they don't get their news anymore from that paper, and they do. The Enterprise does well, but the other possibility is they can look when the town advertises its town meeting and other important functions in town. Guess how they do it? They do it in 2-point type. Okay. Every businessman in this room knows that you would be out of business if you ran an ad campaign like that. Falmouth is a $115 million business with 30,000 customers. Is this a good way to communicate with those people? I don't think so. So what can we do to improve civic engagement in Falmouth? And everyone will have their own list, but here's mine. One small step would be the seats at the Lawrence School where the town meeting has to meet. All right? Those seats were installed in 1952. They are hard as rock. They are smaller than many of the derrieres of our town meeting members. If you want people to sit together for 4 hours at a stretch, they shouldn't have to bring their own pillows. This is the town's legislative body. It's disgraceful that those seats are still that way. Another idea, the Chamber's business after hours is a good example for this town. You get a bunch of people together, you put some food out, you invite them in, and you have a nice time communicating about things that matter to you. The selectmen could do this. They could have a morning coffee hour for the public once a week, mail out some invitations, buy some coffee and donuts, bring some town managers and employees in, and have that conversation. I think the open meeting law would allow that, and it's high time we did something like that. Another idea, not an original one with me, the department heads could do blogs, like the school superintendent does, telling what the department does, inviting public response. Like Bob here, I'm not a blogger or a tweeter or a texter, but a lot of people are. And these new means of communication should be used to get them back involved in the town's affairs. Finally, and this one may be something for Bill to think about, the school board should reconsider its decision to ban the polling places from the primary schools. Making voting convenient for voters is important. Making half the town drive to the high school to vote is just wrong. And ironically, that decision was prompted by a petition with 122 signatures on it. 2/3 of the people who signed that signature had never voted in a town election. Only 6 of them had actually voted in the last 5 elections. These people obviously don't think voting is important, but we do. So these are just a few things on my wish list that we could do to encourage civic communication. Now, there are some hopeful signs out there. Falmouth Community TV has been televising meetings for a long time, and lately they've been producing more in-depth programming with interviews and dialogue. WCAI has been providing more local news. We do have radio, and they do cover local issues. And another good sign, the last town election, with a couple of expensive and controversial questions on the ballot, 43% of the voters showed up, moving the curve back up to where it should go. A lot of people care a lot about this place. They have a lot of knowledge and a demonstrated willingness to participate. We all need to do more to reach out and welcome them, to get them engaged in their town government. So, thank you.
No controversy there, right? Again, before I go on to our fourth speaker, my notes are obviously a little bit different from yours, but one of the things that Eric started with was about diversity. Well, I think the Chamber of Commerce is certainly an example of that, not only on the board, where 15 business people representing various sectors of our economy are there, but you can't get more diverse than a Native American president of the Chamber, and I'm very pleased to be that individual. Eric spoke to the boards and committee vacancies that exist in our town. One of the things that we at the Chamber do continuously is turn to our members and urge them to join these boards, join these committees, represent not only the business sector, clearly, because every citizen has his own point of view, but also to serve on fill those vacancies. Eric spoke to the struggle of government leadership and communications. He's right. Government becomes more and more complex. And it becomes more and more complex because there are more and more issues about leadership. So we have to do something about that. Already we have the same vision in mind with regard to offering coffee and donuts early in the morning. One of our board members, Jeff Nickerson, is starting an initiative where we'll be opening the chamber on Saturday mornings early, inviting our members to drop in and talk about whatever is on their mind, not only in terms of business initiatives, but also what's happening in our community so that we can share those views with our town leaders. The issue of voting and polling places. Voting, just simply voting, in and of itself, is huge. If there's nothing else that we can take from civic life, is our obligation not only to vote, but to urge our fellow citizens to join us. Eric also did some name dropping. Falmouth Community Television. If you look over your shoulder, you'll see them here. Deb Rogers, the executive director and chief operating officer, brought her team in today so that the community will know what we're talking about and hopefully share our interest and our passions. He also mentioned radio. Cape Cod Broadcasting is here because they too are interested in the things that we're doing. So thank you, Eric. Thank you very much. Our fourth speaker is the executive director of the Arts Foundation of Cape Cod. He works at the cutting edge of our cultural frontier, and we've asked him to share what's ahead in art, language, cultural integration, values, tolerance, faith, diversity, and how can we prepare for it. Please welcome Kevin Howard. I'm sorry? Whoops.
Clicker here.
In case you didn't know who Kevin Howard is, there it is.
Great,
Your picture.
thank you.
Sorry about that.
Wow, I'm really going to talk about all that. I want to thank Jay for having the extraordinary vision to put this together, and I knew there was good karma today because I got up and the sun was shining and the birds were chirping, and I think we all need a little break from the precipitation, 7 feet of snow. I want to recognize a few of my cultural colleagues that are in the room, Barbara Milligan from Highfield Hall, Mark Schmidt from Falmouth Historical Society, and Roger Day from Arts Falmouth. Falmouth has an extraordinarily strong cultural community, and that's really part of the fabric of this community. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Also, Michael, I wanted to let you know that in a recent study that was done by the Cape and Islands Workforce Investment Board, 8% of the population here is working in the creative economy. A very important sector here. And that 8% is 25% higher than the national average for that sector. And Bob, all I can say is that I would come to Fitchburg State after listening to you. But I hope you will be a great advocate for STEAM and going from STEM to STEAM. And Eric, I just learned really a lot about Falmouth, including to bring a pillow. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Arts Foundation, just to set the table a little bit. We're a regional arts agency that's been in business since 1988. Our work is to strengthen, support, and promote the Cape Cod arts and cultural scene, and we do it through grants, professional development, training, collaborative marketing, and advocacy. We have 3 methodologies to executing our mission. One is to do programs. Probably our best known program is Pops by the Sea, bringing the Boston Pops down to the Hyannis Village Green, but we actually do programs all over the Cape. We also do a lot of cross-promotional marketing. We do a lot of partnering with the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce and Wendy Northcross to try to promote Cape Cod as elite cultural destination. We're launching a new initiative called Arts Cape Cod, which is going to be a comprehensive website that is going to allow all the events. We estimate there are about 275 cultural organizations on the Cape, producing about 3,000 events. This will be an opportunity not only to promote all those events, but also to have an online box office to be able to buy tickets to any event on the Cape. And then an RSS feed, a real simple syndicate, that will be able to feed online media sites, so it's a one-stop shop for all the cultural organizations, and the enterprise, for example, is able to fill their content with their calendar with our information. So a few deep thoughts. What is culture? What are the unique challenges that are facing our industry? And why do the arts matter now more than ever? First of all, just to give you a little definition on culture, one is traditional high culture, and I would say that is in the category of symphonic music, opera, museums. There's always the avant-garde culture, which is on the cutting edge. It's usually way ahead of its time. Performance art, and things that you realize 30, 40, 50 years later were really inspired. Popular culture, which I think is a little too pervasive. I think I've had enough Justin Bieber to last me a lifetime. But it is part of the cultural milieu that we live in. And then community culture, which is what I think is incredibly important. You here, again, have a strong cultural community with all of the arts on the Hill, Highfield Hall, Highfield Theater, the Cape Cod Conservatory. You have wonderful galleries. You've got the museums on the square. You have a very strong cultural community, and I think that's an important part of the character of the community. So what are the mitigating factors that are affecting our sector? I mean, one is the shift of wealth and population from west to east. The East, China in particular, is investing a tremendous amount of money in building their culture, in becoming creators. And part of it is because they want to start to become the innovators. That's the beauty of learning the arts and being connected to the arts, is it creates innovative thinking. And so the East sees that, and they are taking the opportunity with their incredible growth in wealth and population to start to go in that direction. The proliferation of gadgets and gizmos, which Bob spoke so eloquently to, that is a challenge and an opportunity that we'll kind of talk about. The separation of wealth. There is a significant problem with separation of wealth in this country. And the reality is that what it is going to do is make arts and culture less accessible to a certain part of the population. And this is a potential threat. The lack of corporate support. We live in a world that is increasingly more transactional. And so one of the things that I'm going to talk about is price and value. And the value of particularly arts and culture is not always easy to put a specific price on. And the other thing is the aging population. There are 10,000 people in this country that are turning 65 every single day. We are going to be going to a place in an aging population that is going to have a need for more accessibility. And when I say accessibility, I'm not talking about ramps and curb cuts. I'm talking about 1 in 8 people having some kind of functional disability, be it visual, oral, ambulatory. And what cultural organizations are going to have to do is adjust to that changing demographic and start to create programs that are going to be accessible to all. I want to read this quote. I am of the age that I often wonder what our country would be had Robert Kennedy lived to lead. And this quote sort of sums up his vision. The gross national product does not allow for the health of our children, the quality of their education, or the joy of their play. It does not include the beauty of our poetry, the strength of our marriages, the intelligence of our debates, or the integrity of our public officials. It measures neither our wit nor our courage, neither our wisdom or our learning, neither our compassion nor our devotion to our country. It measures everything, in short, except that which makes life worthwhile. I think that's a tremendous quote and speaks to what the real value of arts and culture is. Here are some fun and not so fun facts. 1 in 3 people is at or near the poverty line. And as I say, there are real impacts in terms of accessibility to the arts and the future of the arts by extension. This one is particularly disturbing. 72 hours of YouTube videos are uploaded every minute of every day of every year. That's a lot of YouTube. For those of you who haven't seen it, I'm been a broken record this week about this new Frontline special called Generation Like. If you haven't seen it, you should watch it because it gives you an insight into the world and what the millennials are doing and what their view of the world is that's disturbing but interesting. And it kind of speaks to where our country is going in a lot of ways. The other thing is that people want to be part of things. So in terms of presentation and what the challenges are and how the arts and culture remains relevant is that things are going to need to be a little bit more participatory in order to appeal to this next generation. Things to think about, and I think this is one of the things that is one of the true challenges, especially for us in New England with our Yankee puritanical kind of potential attitudes, is how to balance preservation and innovation. And I would give the example of Peter Gelb, who runs the Metropolitan Opera. Now, Peter Gelb is responsible, and I don't know how many of you have taken advantage of this opportunity, but there is now something called the Met Live in HD. And there are several places on the Cape that offer that. It's a wonderful thing. It has introduced a brand new generation and a brand new audience to opera because not everybody can go to the Met. Unfortunately, I mean, obviously, Peter Gelb is a visionary to be able to do that. He's actually making people talk about opera in a very real way. The downside is that some of his subscriber base are outraged. They're outraged by the level of the productions that he's doing, and that they feel as if he's a traitor to the tradition of the Met. So the question is, are you willing to let go of some of the models in order to be innovators and think out of the box? I think another one of our challenges is how to distinguish between price and value. Again, in a very transactional world, there is a value to arts and culture that is far beyond what we are able to put a like on, how to quantify it. And that is one of the challenges for all of my colleagues in this industry, is to be able to articulate that value and be able to show that value to the community at large for corporate support and to continue to keep us running and in business. How to define community value. Again, I look at Falmouth and I see all of the wonderful cultural organizations that you have, all the incredible artists. I mean, we are rich on the Cape, Provincetown being the first arts colony in the United States, right from born to Provincetown. We have so many working artists, musicians, writers. We're incredibly rich in that way. But we have to every day be out there defining that community value so that we get the kind of support that we need. The last thing is, you know, how do we remain relevant? And I think part of how we remain relevant is by embracing these opportunities. I give you the example of the Cleveland Museum of Art. It just went through a multi-million-dollar renovation. And basically what you find when you come in is a gigantic digital screen on the wall. And you can go up with your device, your gadget or gizmo, and you can load in. They've got all the different kinds of art that they have in the museum, and you can load in whatever you would like to see and customize a tour on your own device, and then go and take the tour. And in fact, you can leave it loaded on your device so that you can go home and consider it a little bit further. Somebody was telling me the other day that they did a time study of people in a museum and that they actually spend more time reading the labels than they do looking at the artwork, which is really interesting. At the Worcester Museum of Art, they have just removed all the labels from the wall. So these are the kind of things that, thinking outside of the box, that we're going to need to do in order to stay relevant. And I would say that things like the STEAM initiative, our ability to continue to be a strong part of the community is going to be how arts and culture is going to continue to be relevant. I think we have a tremendous contribution to be able to make to the economy here. I think we are in complement with the incredible natural resources that we have. I like to say, what are you going to do on a rainy day? And there are plenty of alternatives. So I want to thank, again, Jay, for inviting me to be here, and thanks for your attention.
You know, it's interesting when we were putting this together, and Barbara Wand and Pat Keating were working with me to talk about how do we frame this conversation and who do we ask to lead us in this discussion. We knew that we would be left with more questions than answers, because looking into the future is just the process. There's nothing there concrete that we can fully expect. We can only hope to achieve, and as Kevin said, working out of the box, those things can happen. So again, some of my notes dealt with the concerns that Kevin has expressed and the challenges that are there with regards to wealth separation, functional disabilities. Even there, functional disabilities, the Cape's aging demographic, a fact that concerns Atria Senior Living and others like neighborhood Falmouth. They're engaged in independent and assisted living because they know that our demographic is changing and our senior population is increasing, and they're preparing for the future along with us. Distinguishing between price and value, what a challenge. How do we define value in a world that is driven by price? An interesting dilemma. And then, of course, culturally, how do we remain relevant? And so to that question asked by Kevin, I can only say, thank goodness we have the Arts Foundation of Cape Cod. I know that I've learned that Congressman Keating, his schedule is forcing him to run a little bit late. And I know that last night our next speaker reached out to me around 11:30 p.m. and said, I'm going to try to make my presentation fit into the time slot that you have. So with that, I'm going to give her an opportunity to enjoy the lectern, take a few minutes longer then, because we'll benefit from it. And so in order to give her that opportunity, as you know, I've made a few notes, and I want to share these with you. Our fifth speaker is the president and director of Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. Dr. Avery helped form an integrated science and assessment program that examines the impacts of climate variability on water in the American West. She also worked with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the Climate Change Science Program to help formulate a national strategic science plan for climate research. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we should listen to Dr. Avery.
Well, thank you, Jay, and it's really a great honor and pleasure to be here, and thank you to all the speakers. I've learned so much, and I appreciate all your wisdom and work that you have done and continue to do. I thought I'd chat with you a little bit about building resilient communities and the science and democratic process, the stakeholder engagement, and how that all forms together on how we are going to have resilient communities, communities that can absorb shocks that are going to be presented to us in our changing environmental world. And so I am talking to you about these resilient communities through the lens of the environment. That environment consists, of course, not of just our beautiful coastal waters, but also of our land and atmosphere, and the increasing pressures that we're putting on it, demands that we're putting on it to our growing populations in the region. To start off with, it's just going to take a little assessment of our regional environment, and it is a mixed bag, and it depends on what part of the environment that you're actually looking through to determine if it's healthy or not. And the health of Cape Cod and Massachusetts and Northeast is a mixed bag. And so when I look at the Cape Cod, I cannot just look at the environment of the Cape Cod without understanding what's happening in the broader context. So Boston Harbor is certainly cleaner than it has been in decades. It's leading to a revitalized waterfront in the city. It's an example of how good science can help inform strong science and policy decisions while also accounting for and informing competing interests in terms of business, in terms of preservations, in terms of quality of life. We now have a better understanding of the physical and biological drivers behind harmful algal blooms in the Northeast. And we also have the technological means to monitor and predict seasonal outbreaks that have certainly helped us basically predict, monitor, and warn populations of these toxic events. Ship strikes of whales are down dramatically thanks to a partnership between scientists and the shipping industry that moved shipping lanes out of some of the most productive whale feeding grounds, and also saw the development in the meantime of novel technology to detect and report the presence of whales in the path of ships. I think this is a tremendous success story in the Boston Harbor area that has actually preserved a tremendous asset and a wonderful species in our unique waters around the Cape. On the negative side, our coastal water quality, driven by population density in sensitive areas, obviously warming that is occurring, climate change is poor and it is declining. The health of our marine ecosystems are stressed by nutrient loading, warming, and acidification. Development in historic and potential flood zone, it reduces ability of our natural systems to protect us. We've lost an awful lot of the natural buffers that we often rely on. All you have to do is look at the flooding of Surf Drive, okay, on a regular basis. And there are many examples of this, of which, of course, hurricanes and hurricane paths will be one of those areas. While scallop and lobster stocks are looking good, groundfish stocks are at an all-time low. And questions still remain over the science behind stock assessments, and as a result, the policy decisions that help inform and regulate our fishing activities. Air quality on the Cape is good, and it's been better than it has in the past, but we're still downwind of an entire U.S., so the air quality index can be and will be variable along the way. So that's just sort of a quick sort of from different lenses and perspectives. So let's now kind of look at some of the challenges that regarding our regional and local environments. And you cannot possibly talk about the future and the challenges that communities have if you don't take into account climate change. And our climate is changing. There's nothing that we don't know about this. The climate definitely isn't changing, and it's not just these global temperatures that one sees in the newspaper. There are many signatures of our climate changing. Certainly the air temperature is changing, our water vapor is increasing, the temperature over the oceans is going up, sea surface temperature is going up, sea levels are rising, temperature over land has increased, the snow cover has declined, glaciers have declined, the Arctic has melted, sea ice has melted, and the ocean heat content has dramatically increased. And in fact, most of the excess heat that's gone up into the atmosphere by carbon dioxide release, 90% of that has ended up in the ocean. Okay? That heat capacity is what's obviously warmed the surface of the ocean. It's also warmed the middle part of the ocean And recently, just a few months ago, we are seeing increasing evidence that that warming is penetrating into the deepest parts of our ocean, parts of the ocean that we know really relatively little about. So it is no question that the average temperatures of our warming waters are likely to be responsible for some of the recent outbreaks that we've seen on the Cape in Vibrio P and oysters. And we need to be vigilant to other changes in the environment brought about warming and the changes associated with a changing climate. We will undoubtedly see changing storm and precipitation patterns, as well as a rise in extreme weather. And I'm not just talking about extreme weather in terms of hurricanes, okay? I'm talking about just deluges, where you get all of a sudden just lots of water at a short period of time, and the land cannot absorb it quickly enough. I am talking about droughts and heat waves that impact human health, as well as health of other systems. And preparing communities sort of to adapt to changes in climate and precipitation patterns that may result in extreme storms is very, very difficult, especially in the Northeast, where you have an aging infrastructure. You have an infrastructure that has been based upon formation of this country in many ways. The plans of our cities, how they're laid out, how we move things around, our transportation systems, where we've put our buildings, how we've used our barrier islands, our salt marshes, how we've built upon these. All of these put us in much more risk and danger that we've had in the past. Warming is here, and it's in high latitudes. It's well documented, and certainly sea level rise, and certainly increases that sea level rise, increases the reach of storm surges, exasperates the erosion that we already have experienced in many areas in the region around the Cape. And let's just take a moment to look at a regional hurricane storm history. This is one of our scientists, Jeff Donnelly, has done a lot of work on the historical aspects of hurricanes in the Northeast. And on the left, you see the hurricane tracks over many, many years. And of course, you have there imposed upon that Sandy. On the right, of course, is the sea level rise and the inundation that would have happened if Sandy had actually occurred on here. And I don't know if you can see this very well. Yeah, but this dark line here, of course, here's the Cape along here. I think this must be the salt pond along in here. You can certainly see that Falmouth downtown would be an isolated island in many ways if Sandy were to hit. And you can see that this is the level of the high water that would have, the edge of the high water. Everything north of that would have been dry. Everything south of that would have been flooded. So, these are certain things to kind of put this in historical context of what we're looking. So why was there so much damage from Sandy? And in fact, we know why there was so much damage. There's basically two major regions. The picture on the left shows you the New Jersey, New York area before building. Lots of natural buffer systems, lots of barrier islands that basically protected storm surge from communities. On the right is the population density and the building and infrastructure you see on that storm surge protection area. Why so much damage from Sandy? And this is just an estimation, or it looks at the population growth on the left. It's the population growth in Atlantic, Cape May, Middlesex, Monmouth, and Ocean, and you can see the population growth in those New Jersey coastal counties. So a convergence of land use, population growth, challenges associated with a storm track that went inland, and the associated amounts of water that inundated that area, only to be exacerbated in the future, of course, by sea level rise. What are some of the adaptation strategies that one community should be thinking about in terms of resilience and looking at the risk? These are just sort of the three that people talk about, the communities talk about. That is planned retreat, moving your buildings away from these vulnerable coastal areas. Accommodate. We're having more of our buildings on stilts. Certainly another option that can be done. And the third is to protect, both by hardened infrastructure, the building of seawalls, and there's certainly many, many places around the world, in the United States, New York and Boston, obviously thinking about seawall hardening of infrastructure. But it's also important, I think, for us to think in terms of resiliency, what is a combination of hard structures with soft defenses, restoring some of our habitat, looking carefully at where we build and how we might in the future protect that area, those particular ecosystem services that the coastal areas provide us. A 1.5-foot sea level rise would expose property worth about $6 trillion to coastal flooding in the U.S. Northeast metropolitan area alone. Okay, it's a heavily density area. Another challenge to us is in terms of water quality. Climate change means that we're going to see warmer waters in the region, leading to changing habitat for marine organisms, including commercially important species. These are just some of the water quality components that one looks at from a scientific view. Where does our contamination come from? Well, certainly from industry sources, from fertilizer uses, from septic issues, from erosion and runoff, river inputs, upwelling water from the deep ocean. All of these will determine the water quality that we have in our estuaries, in our bays, in our coastal areas, and our continental shelf in general. Increased atmospheric carbon dioxide is also lowering the pH of the ocean around the world, and it's already having effects on marine organisms and ecosystems. So you have almost two different scales of what's happening with our water quality. One is scales of things that we as communities can have major control over, okay? How do we flush things through? What is the nutrient loading into our systems? The other is the global scale issue. It's the other side of climate change, global climate change, and that is as the ocean uptakes more of that atmospheric carbon dioxide, it becomes more acidic. Okay, and so that's a larger challenge because that really requires dealing with the carbon footprint that we all have on a global scale. So these are certainly some. The water that's coastal acidification is obviously driven through nutrient runoff from the land and through groundwater, which exacerbates the large-scale change that we're actually seeing right now. I think I've kind of really said that. This is just a slide of the hypoxia and acidification of Waquoit Bay. And basically, it's the pollution, the nutrient loading, the pollution that basically can cause nuisance algal blooms. Most of this is coming through in terms of our septic systems. And you can basically see in this diagram here that the water, when you have low pH in Waquoit Bay, you're going to have low oxygen levels in both. They're both driven by these excess nutrients, mostly via the groundwater and mostly from septic systems. That nitrogen loading in Waquoit Bay has changed. If you look from the 1930s to the 1990s, and I would just look at how much of that has gone, that change, where it's coming from. In the 1930s, 77% of that nitrogen loading came from atmospheric deposition. That's now down to 38% of the load. You look at the increase here, 7% of the load in the 1930s was associated with wastewater. With today, that's about 43%. And so these are things that we have control over. These are things that we can deal with as societies. The other challenge is the actual multiple use management of our coastal environment. And I almost like to say that we've got to deal with this because if not, it's too big to fail. Our coastal environments, our ocean, which we rely on so much, provide tremendous ecosystem services that we have. And we've had, obviously, humans have had a complicated past to say the least, when it comes with our interaction with the environment. And we certainly see that play out in land, but often I think that we just take the ocean for granted. We don't really think about it. You look at the beautiful sunrise over the surface and you say, oh, isn't this wonderful? We bring in tourists and recreation, and people go on the surface. But really, a lot of the action in the ocean and a lot of its importance to us as humans is below that surface. Clearly, the ocean is important in terms of circulating water. It's a driver of our water cycle, availability of our fresh water. It's the driver of a movement of carbon around the globe, and it certainly moves heat and basically helps regulate our climate, our precipitation. It produces oxygen. Half the oxygen you are breathing, i.e. every second breath you are taking, comes from processes done in the ocean, oxygen-producing processes in the ocean. transportation, shipping, recreational boating. Obviously, these are important aspects of our and things that we rely on the ocean for. Recreation, scuba, fisheries, certainly a commercially viable business in the region here. It also has, as we've said, unfortunately, been waste storage, and also, in general, it provides minerals and oil, tremendous amount of biodiversity, and probably the ocean is where you have some of the greatest biodiversity in terms of our adaptations as a species on this planet. So we have many competing interests, both social and economic, to balance against those natural benefits that the ocean and coastal areas provide it, and their list is only going to go bigger and longer as time goes on. The question that remains for us as scientists and as citizens will be doing how do we lay the groundwork? How do we lay the groundwork as scientists and citizen scientists for making strong decision making? And how well can we do at communicating things like risks and uncertainty to the public, and getting that information and getting ourselves involved in the democratic process that allows us to make works with stakeholders and cities to make wise decisions about building resilient communities. The population growth, tourism, commercial and recreational fishing, shipping, we've made all of these, and I would like to say the aesthetic and cultural values of living in a coastal area are tremendous things that we should all applaud and protect. So managing this, the effects on communities, these are sorts of the challenge. So now let me talk about opportunities. And all of these challenges come at a time which, from a scientific point of view, we are challenged by these things, but we have opportunities for getting into the ocean and doing new science because of technology development. And we're at the cusp right now of breakthrough technologies that allow us access to observing and monitoring systems in the ocean. The funding, of course, is not there completely to do this, but in ways. And this picture just kind of depicts the fact that robotics is really making a strong component, a strong way of getting to the ocean. We still will have ships, that research ships, that on the surface. I was so glad to hear you talk about the robotics cluster and how we're being involved in that with our new Center for Marine Robotics that involves not only scientists, but also the for-profit business sectors, as well as the Navy. And so, the types of new sensors that we have, biological sensors that are genetic labs in a can that you can just put into the ocean, let it run, it will filter and in real time tell you what kinds of toxic things that are happening and get that information back up. The ability to put all of these assets, these sensors, these platforms in an integrated observing system is something that we've been working on. And the science community is poised, I think, to really begin to look at some of these bigger ocean questions from a very integrated, interdisciplinary point of view. And the data stream that's going to be coming out of here is phenomenal, which gets back to the discoveries that will be able to happen with big data and big data science as we move forward. So you could get me giving a 2-hour talk on this stuff. That's all but it's better if you just come down to Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution and have a tour, okay? There are many economic opportunities, the economies of the ocean. There are many economic activities in the region related to the environment, particularly the ocean, both locally and globally. The Marine Technology Center, technology sector in Massachusetts drives about $300 billion in sales and about $1.3 billion in wages to 22,400 jobs. That's as of 2006. I don't have 2014, which would probably be significantly higher. These business activities result in products and knowledge that also lead to that observing strategy that is talked about in the previous slide, and will help us manage the marine environment in the future. There are things such as offshore energy utilization, and how that offshore energy utilization is going to be done in a sustainable and sensitive way is another opportunity for the region. I'd also like to basically talk about an opportunity that balances the nutrient loading problem with a economic opportunity, and that is being able to remove nitrogen from our bays and estuaries using the most magnificent creature, the oyster. You know, an oyster basically will, I think it's going to be, it can have a positive impact on the habitat and water quality, because one oyster can filter between 20 to 50 gallons of water per day. Now that's a lot of water, okay? And by when filtering that, it removes those excess nutrients in the process. Now you can't just put oysters out there and think you're going to remove all of the nitrogen. In fact, science shows that the maximum net benefit is basically using about 6% of the bay area, and that would remove about 40% of the nitrogen target. So that gives you, in a sense, but that does mean that you can have an aquaculture enterprise here that would be quite significant in terms of an economic seafood production, as well as cleaning up our estuaries and bays. Scientifically what needs to happen is to sort of model that ecological carrying capacity, and of course it's only going to be part of the solution. It won't remove all of it. And then finally, I think the opportunities are basically in science-based management, policy and management. Science does not hold all the answers. I would be stupid to say that it did, but we can provide some of the basis for discussions and decisions between decision makers and stakeholders. It can lead to those discussions to sustainable management of our shorelines. Some of the science issues some of the issues that the community is facing that could benefit from more accurate science are certainly the sewering and the alternatives to the Cape Cod's wastewater treatment problem. Coastal development and redevelopment, coastal hazards and risk management, groundwater pollution, offshore wind energy, and wave and tidal energy as well. And of course, this requires trust. It requires trust from the community in the science. The science must be transparent. It must be obvious. The data must be made publicly available. But our goal is ultimately to build resilient communities that we as scientists also live in and are part of that democratic process. I'd like to just end with a couple sort of success stories where science has had an impact on decision that impacts here, and certainly the sea scallops before the mid 1998, 1997, the management system that was in place obviously led to a dramatic decline in sea scallops, and after that, using new science base that helped formulate what catch could be done, that management has succeeded quite successfully. And another success story locally that I'm very pleased with was the opening up of a clam, the harvesting of clams on Georges Bank. It was a clam industry that had been shut down for 25 years, and that was based on science, the science associated with biophysical modeling and ecosystems of harmful algal blooms, the toxicity of those blooms, and to be able to genetically determine the difference between what's on shore and what's on Georges Bank that allowed this particular fishery to open up dramatically recently. So these are opportunities, and they are success stories that we can all be proud of. So connecting science to action, we do need to understand our natural environment, the ocean. I'd like to think of Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution's mission is to know the ocean, and what that means is not only understanding the ocean as its physical, chemical, and biological state, but how it interacts with the land, with the atmosphere, with the seafloor, with ice, and with humanity. Okay, humanity is a driver on our environment. It is a huge forcing function on our environment. But understanding that interface between the natural or the physical, chemical, biological environment that isn't part of humanity, and the population pressures, the land use, the ecosystem services, the energy demands, how we're urbanizing ourselves, all of these is an important way to connect science into action, which then ultimately leads to developing information systems to help manage and make wise decisions that can be done through actions that allow us to live sustainably and build resilient communities. The Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution is greatly honored to actually be in a beautiful spot that so meets the interests, the importance, and the ability for us to accomplish our science. We do appreciate the community and all it brings to us in the region. I think it's a wonderful asset and a great synergy between the organizations all around the community, and we look forward to opportunity to continue to build resilient communities in Falmouth on Cape Cod. Thank you very much.
So we've learned that warming is here. Every breath we take, our coastal environment. I'm glad that our town manager, Julian Suso, is here to hear that, and the chairman of our Board of Selectmen. I'm also pleased that Paul Nizwicki of the Cape Cod Commission is here because of their interest, their efforts to help us in this regard. And did you pick up on that opportunity? Susan invited us all to Hui. And I don't want to diminish that one bit. I think that's a lovely invitation, and it's been my habit since I moved here in 2000 to knock on as many doors as possible and find out what people are doing. So let's take her up on that. I've just learned and noticed that our keynote speaker is here, so we'll move along briskly. Our keynote speaker represents the 9th Massachusetts Congressional District. That's South Shore and South Coast, Cape Cod, Martha's Vineyard, and Nantucket. He accepted our invitation to help us calibrate our focus and forward thinking so that we can prepare and participate in our own future. After the Congressman has spoken, please remain seated for our closing remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you our Congressman, Bill Keating.
I just want to put everyone at ease. When they say keynote, sometimes that equates to long, and we're up against our luncheon time. So relax. I don't think, I'll edit as I go along some of my remarks and some of the things I'd like to say. You know, I get up every morning where I live, just next door in Bourne, and you know, I'll be driving and just go by the Uptuxet trading post where Native Americans had much of their early trading in our history. I'll look out and cross the railroad tracks where I live and think of the Gardner family that built the compound I'm in, and the rail that they put there, some of that leading to Grover Cleveland's summertime White House. I look at out over the Little Bay, and I look out to the canal, and I see, you know, ships going. I see tankers, and I see barges going through, and think of the history that we have in this whole area. And it's easy for me to imagine sometimes looking out and just thinking back to how things were 100 years ago, 150 years ago, 200 years ago, and getting a real glimpse of what that is. You know, it's easier to look back at things and to get a sense. Even we argue about history, but still you get a clearer limit about what discrete area you're talking about, what happened. It's a lot harder to look into the future. If it was that easy to look in the future and predict, as we approach spring training, and the Red Sox would know with certainty which minor leaguers to trade, which to keep, which ones would be all-stars. But I look at the example of the Falmouth Commodores, and I'll look at people like players like David Aardsma, Tito Martinez, and even Jacoby Ellsbury, and I look at the fact that that's where they played, and that's where they succeeded, that's where they grew, and they're now either former all-stars or former great players, or in a couple of instances still playing ball. So it's easy to look at that, and I think the lesson you learn from that, if you're looking at the future and who might succeed, think of the baseball example and think of the Cape Cod League and the Commodores, because the reason they're there, the reason they're attracted to come there, the reason they build up their skills and go forward and succeed is because of the Cape Cod League and because of teams like the Commodores. And they're building a foundation. So if you're going to try and get a glimpse at where you're going in the future, and where this region might go, look to the foundation. Look to what's in place. And I caught Susan's remarks, and you get a real sense here this morning just where we might be going. But what are the foundations? What are the pillars we look at in the Falmouth area for our success? I think you've heard some of them this morning, dealing with the arts and how important that is, the culture and the arts informing a community, whether it's Arts Alive, the Jazz Fest, the children's program, which is so important in our region to instill an appreciation and a foundation for the arts, and even the Arts Center. It's now there that a friend of mine that we lost worked so hard to help establish, Landy Landrow here in Falmouth, and how that is part of our area as well. You can look to the spiritual diversity that's here and what's there for communities to grow on and what's there for communities to offer. You can look at public safety issues and realize we have a safe community, one that allows growth, attracts people to come, and we work on those areas to improve them, even at the federal level, whether it's through our grants that will help public safety and the unique needs here of a community, or other basic needs. And one of the things looking to the future, I hope and I see success in, I've seen this community and communities that surround this make great efforts on one of the greatest challenges we have in terms of public health and public safety, and that's dealing with the drug problem. Prescription drugs, and then the inevitable, it seems, cheaper, more potent heroin that's just could initially is so pure it can be sniffed, and then results in intravenous use and the plague that we have. But what I see looking to the future here is a community. I've been a part of the efforts that have been here ongoing, to people turning in their drugs, going to the police station, and I see that kind of community effort and response. I see more education on that, and I see us working on those challenges they had successfully because of the efforts of people here and what we're really doing going forward as a community. I also look at areas, and we touched on them, we had great speakers through the course of the day on education. And I think if you're looking at the future for this community and this region, you have to really be very hopeful and secure in seeing that we're going to be at the vanguard of so many other issues. Not only do we have a good foundation of a school system here, but we also have some of the greatest educational areas and resources in the entire state, and in some instances the entire country. You've heard from Susan Avery and what a great resource and what's going on at Huey and the other institutes at Woods Hole. President Cox, you know, is with 4 Cs, is they're going forward with help from the state in particular, and hopefully some more help federally, but they're going forward in STEM research and making sure that that kind of education is there and in place. And they're working in a complementary fashion to what will be the first 4-year college on Cape Cod in Yarmouth, the other part of the Cape, that really will, I think, help young people stay here, attract people to grow here, continue on, and that's with what's happening with Bridgewater State College and their location here as well. We have Mass Maritime, where right now seniors that are graduating there are choosing among 4 or 5 major job opportunities, some of them starting in 6 figures because of the type of education they have there, the engineering background, and the job opportunities that are there. And we're right around the south coast with UMass Dartmouth and all the work that's being done there that's so important for our region. I envision the future of this area too, to be one that's recognized same way that Silicon Valley perhaps is recognized in California, as one where we will be the center of maritime education, research, and economic activities. Whether it's some of the water issues that Susan talked about. I was in Provincetown yesterday, and I did see the entire bathhouse that's portable. So as the erosion occurs, they'll just simply move the entire facilities back further. I've seen the new piers that are there that are going to be storm resistant, and the way they're going to be built they're going to withstand storms and be there 20 years. So that's all the result of our science, technology, and education, and it's happening here. Some of the grants I've helped with in our area, where we've received millions of dollars in grants, one of the reasons we've been successful in those grants is because the communities and the entities that are sponsoring those grants have done so well in terms of dealing with the science that's behind it, the technology behind it, and they've taken all that expertise. And when you're trying to compete for limited funds, that's one of the reasons here in this region we've done so well, because they're way ahead of their research, they're thoughtful, and they're doing things that when you compete with other parts of the country, we win as a result of it. I think that this will be a center for energy, all kinds of energy. I know that in the South Coast, and it'll affect here too, the offshore wind energy through Cape Wind is going to produce jobs. It's one of the fastest growing job creators in the state of Massachusetts. And we will be one of the leaders, if not the leader, in offshore wind. Clearly, if everything goes the way it's going now, we're going to be the leader in the country on that. And that's going to also have an effect for other industries that will spin off of that and be here and be located near where we are. We're working on a grant, hopefully a very competitive one, to be one of the 4 centers in the United States of America on kinetic energy through the water, hydrokinetic energy. We're trying to do that at Mass Maritime as a site. But some of the other activities already in place, where there's a pilot off Edgartown, are there in place, and I think we're going to be a leader in this area, in this region, on that kind of energy and the jobs that'll come from that. Susan mentioned water quality and all the issues that surround that. That's going to, again, make this region prime for investment. What we have as burdens sometimes with our water challenges and water mitigation issues can be turned in, and I think will be turned into, advantages. As we meet those challenges, there will be businesses that'll spin off of that. And they're going to be located here and in this region. And this will be prime for investment capital on the private side that's coming in, taking advantage of this. I look at what's helping us grow and what's here as a foundation in the healthcare area. You know, it wasn't long ago that you had to always be trekking to Boston or trying to go to the teaching hospitals or get the best health care. And that was some of the reasons I think people just stayed here seasonally. And it was some of the reasons why we didn't attract certain people when they were comparing where to live, where to invest, where to grow. But that's changed. If you look at the Cape Cod healthcare system and you look at Falmouth Hospital and the cancer center that's there, and you look at the relationships that are built with the Boston teaching hospitals and Dana-Farber and what exists there, that is something that's a real asset and a resource for our area going forward. And that's going to help our growth in the future as well as deal with the present. And of course, you can't talk about this area without dealing with the tourism issues, which I think you all know, and I think we all realize can continue to grow. And one of the ways that will accent that, I think, is what I look forward and see in terms of transportation issues. I think Tom Cahere and the people here have done a great job of leveraging money. One of the things we've tried to do at the federal level is provide more flexibility with federal monies, and he's certainly taken advantage of that. He's used it to make it one of the most energy efficient transportation systems in the country and certainly in the state. And he's taken money and leveraged it for things like the Cape Flyer, which has been a great success and will help not only tourism, but I think will be the foundation very shortly where we will have commuter rail service connected from the Cape all the way to Boston, which again will help us grow and make this much more attractive and viable for that kind of attraction to live, attraction to grow economically. The thing that I want to close with is something that perhaps some people have recognized, but I think you'll see more going into the future. And that's, as you go down Main Street, you can sit here and, just stop people, as I have from time to time, to talk. And you'll see people from Pennsylvania, you'll see people from Connecticut, you'll see people from New York, and all parts of the country. What you're going to see more of in the future, you will see people from you'll see people from Germany, you'll see people from England, you'll see people from France, you'll see people. There will be, I think, over the next decade or so, an infusion in this region of international exposure. And I think that is going to be really tied to a lot of the business opportunities that we have. One of the things that I'm working on very strongly is to have a free trade agreement with the European Union and the United States. That sounds like something that sounds great, that'll improve our economy, help them, and raise the shared values we have. But it's also important for Massachusetts, and it's important for this region. Some of the research that we've done has shown that that type of agreement will result in 28% increase in exports from Massachusetts alone, a lot of them from our region. And a lot of the industries that are interested in investing here are the ones that we have talked about, the innovative industries that deal with energy, that deal with research, that deal with how to deal with water mitigation issues. These are the things that will attract people here, in particular this part of the state. So as I look forward at what's happening, and I'm trying to cast a glance, and I think of the analogy of looking for all-stars in the baseball world. I think you can look at Falmouth, and you can look at, which is the hub of this whole portion of the Cape and southeastern Massachusetts. You can look at Falmouth, and you can look at our entire region, and you can see we are setting the stage right now to become the incubator for these future all-star enterprises. I'm excited about it. I think as we look at celebrating this year the 100th anniversary of the canal, I think we'll be looking at it very differently in the years to come. We won't be looking backwards 100 years at something that divides us. We'll be looking at a new economy and a new region here where we're more connected. We're already seeing that with broadband expansion and how that's happening. That's going to be a catalyst for the small businesses that are going to flourish here as well. So as we look forward at all-star opportunities, it's great to look back and see the anniversary they were celebrating of the Chamber, because the Chamber is a conduit to these small businesses, to the community, to all these needs that we have had, and to building the foundation that we're going to build on for the future. So I congratulate the Chamber on this milestone, and look forward to a very happy and healthy future right here in Cape Cod. Thank you.
Bill, I'm going to have to get you stand by me here for a moment.
Should I present this
Oh,
to you?
absolutely.
Along those lines, if I could, I'd like to present Jay with a congressional record recognizing the Chamber's 100th anniversary and the essential role it's played in the Falmouth community, connecting businesses and offering visitors important perspectives on our area. And I won't go on because lunch is nearby. People that are interested can read it, but I would like to present that to Jay.
Bill, let's move over to the center. Right over here and we'll take a picture. You know I never miss a photo opportunity, right? So, Bill, I'll take it over here. I know our photographer is looking for you. Here we go. Thank you. And if you'll stand by. Thank you. Just one moment. So I'm not going to summarize Bill's comments, but I will mention this. He was talking about our visitors that will be coming in the future. I can report to you that in Falmouth last year, with more than 17,000 visitors that came through the Chamber door, we recorded visitors from 32 foreign countries. So with that, I'd like to do an award presentation of our own. Bill, since taking your elected seat in Congress, we have watched your swift involvement in matters of interest and concern to us. For your work to promote, support, and advocate for the people and businesses of Falmouth and Cape Cod and the 9th Congressional District, we asked you to accept the Falmouth Chamber of Commerce First Focused on Our Future Leadership Award. In closing, I want to thank you all for coming. Thank you for giving us a big piece of your weekend. I really appreciate it. I want to thank our guest speakers. I couldn't ask for a better panel. And you know, I've got the thumb drive with all of this on it, and I feel we just hit the mother load. And of course, because it is the Chamber of Commerce, I'm prepared to share it with all of you. I want to thank our other sponsors, of course, and the folks that have been helping here today. I have a clicker here. Thank you, Barbara. We're past that. There we are. And I want to put it up on the screen. Falmouth Community Television, the Upper Cape Camera Club, represented by Sherry Martin and Bobby Sokol. Of course, I want to thank our geek girl, Adrienne Bowerman, for helping us out, the Seacrest Beach Hotel staff, and of course, my Centennial Committee members, Barbara and Pat. I also happen to notice that a lot of our volunteers at the Chamber are here, and they are so important to us. Thank you guys for joining us, and our Board of Directors. Thank you all. Enjoy. Drive safely. Oh, one more moment. I'm sorry. I just remembered there was one more thought. I know that Senator Elizabeth Warren had intended to be here, could not. But she did send her regional representative, and you never want to lose an opportunity to connect with that individual. Will you please stand? I know you're in the, there she is. All right, so if you want to talk to your senator, there she is. All right, and now thank you all very much.